Welcome back to Society Case Files. My name is Robert, and today I'm going to do my proper review of Assassin's Creed Shadows. I have played this game a lot since I did my early impressions, and I know that it has been about a week, so it's probably likely that if anyone cares about the game, they've already tried it. But if you're still on the fence, if you've been thinking about it, if you just want to hear more from somebody who, well, quite frankly, I played it like a full-time job for this whole week, but if you just want to hear some more information, then here you go. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Otherwise, I'm going to dive right in. So Assassin's Creed Shadows is a genuine entry in the series. It's not like Mirage, which was sort of a halfway, I guess, just a carrot for us while they produced something that was more like Valhalla or Odyssey. That one was previous generation in a lot of ways. It didn't have the leveling. It didn't have a lot of stuff that this one does. This game is much more of what we've come to expect from the more modern Assassin's Creed games. And the way I'm going to go about this review is I'm going to talk about one random thing, some great stuff, and then some not so great stuff, and then I'll wrap it up. Try and keep it at least a little bit brief. So the random thing, I did address it a little bit in my early impression, and that was the Ghost of Tsushima comparison. I mean, yeah, it's very close. And if you don't have a PC or a PlayStation, this is a good alternative. There are some things that I like more about AC and some I like more about Ghost. One of the things that is cooler for me in AC is the list. You know, just having a list of targets that you got to get, it makes it easier to sort of prioritize and know where you're going. For some reason, Ghost of Tsushima felt daunting in a way that actually got me to stop playing. I just felt overwhelmed by the distances and stuff. And actually, humorously enough, AC suffers from that in a much more profound way, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So, the good. The graphics. I think that the graphics are fantastic. There are still some problems with tearing. Some of the renders look like they came from an earlier period in the development cycle, and I don't think it's quite as beautiful as other games around this time, but it is pretty impressive. The particles and everything else look really good, and that's kind of important for one of the big entries for the game. It's got to look great, and they did a good job with that. The combat. The combat is really fun. I enjoy the fact that there are just so many different ways to go about a problem. You've got two different characters with very different styles. You've got the ninja has multiple weapons and multiple tools at their disposal, not to mention all of the cool stealth stuff you can pull off and that sort of thing. And if you get tired of that, you can just jump in as the samurai and go ham because you're an unstoppable maniac with that sword and you can just tear people up. So I think the combat is overall really fun, and it kind of reminds me of how much fun I had with Valhalla when you just get two weapons and go to town on people. This one has that too, only it has to separate it out into two characters because while you can get away with some of that with the ninja, it's not as easy as it is with the samurai. So something to keep in mind. The stealth. Let's just talk about that. There's some good and bad. There are moments where it actually feels a little terrible because you could get detected very quickly in some situations. And the way that Assassin's Creed has always worked is the controls are a little wonky. They haven't really fixed that. There are times that you're trying to drop, and dropping quickly is the difference between being discovered and not. And instead of dropping, your character decides that they're just going to parkour to the left a little bit for whatever reason. And that happens often enough that it makes stealth a little hard. And considering you can only do it with the ninja, it's something to consider that you're not going to be doing it with the samurai. He's pretty much just going to run around and tear stuff up. So oftentimes if you get discovered, then you're pretty much going to be hunted to the ends of the earth. And while they will sort of settle down, at least like you're back in stealth mode, they're wandering around, they're no longer in position. So it's a lot harder to decide how you're going to approach the situation. Now, you do have rooftops and bushes, and you can like duck underwater and breathe underwater to do stealth stuff. I quite honestly only used the rooftops and bushes, and there was a lot of ways to cheese things. You could go up on the roof, lie down, wait for people to calm down a little bit, then creep around and throw one of your weapons at them or jump on them. So you can abuse stealth pretty well, pretty much like other Assassin's Creed games. So there is that. The assassination mechanic is kind of annoying in one respect because you do have to buy it up to be able to take out the biggest enemies. But once you max it out, it feels like you're playing a standard Assassin's Creed game again. You can really use that in a tactical way. Go after the big guys, hit them from above. You don't have to worry about them just tossing you around. They also have this mechanic where if you creep up on someone and you're in front of them and they happen to notice at the last second they can stop you, well, you can buy a power to make that go away so you can take them out no matter what. And that's all around pretty cool. I mean, again, it's still an Assassin's Creed game and it feels exactly the same as pretty much every other game before that. The content. This is a good and bad thing. I'll talk about the bad in a few minutes, but the good is you're definitely going to get your money's worth. There is so much to do in this game. It's absolute madness. There are multiple rings of people to assassinate. There are tons of side quests, tons of things that people want you to do. And then beyond those, there are things that you can go hunt down to do on the map, little side errands. Now, those can keep you busy for a very long time, and they actually do provide you with good reason to do it because it is tied to leveling up and getting more skill points, and in some cases buying things for your hideout, that kind of thing. So I think they did a good job of making you want to do it and incentivizing it. I'd say that I like about 70% of what they put in, and I'll talk about the other 30% in a moment. The backstory. That is one of my favorite parts of Assassin's Creed Shadows. They really do give you the opportunity to meet these people that you're going to be playing and become invested in them, not just who they are, but who they were. You get to see their past leading up to the present day. And I think that's really important in these games. It's one of the reasons that Ezio became so lovable. You get to see him before he was an assassin, watch as his family was destroyed, and see him become an assassin later. It was just awesome. It's actually something that the first game kind of failed at, since Altair just starts off as a master assassin, gets in trouble for being a jerk, and then gets demoted, and then you just basically climb your way back up to being a master assassin. You don't really get his backstory in there. And then, of course, in Assassin's Creed 3, they went totally ham and they started you playing your character's father, and then you got to play him as a boy. You know, we're kind of getting a little bit closer to that with Assassin's Creed Shadows, since you do get to see a lot of the ninjas' early days, and you get to understand why they both care and what they're doing. So it was really fun, and I actually cared about the story more because of that. Now, speaking of story, let's move into that. I'm about 70% all in on the story. It has a lot of the same feel of other games. I mean, you got the big ring that you've got to take down, and they've basically wronged you for whatever reason, and it's important to go through them all. Each of them has between 3 and 5 quests that you have to achieve in order to be capable of even going after the specific target. And I kind of found it a little bit frustrating. It would have been nice if some of them could have been ignored, or you could have circumvented them by doing something else, because a few of them do feel very arbitrary and just ridiculous. And for the most part, I guess it's okay. But at least they've done away with some of the worst stuff in Assassin's Creed, like tailing people. Thank God for that. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know. I'm probably going to do a Friday ramble about this at some point where I discuss all the Assassin's Creed games, but tailing people was probably the worst thing ever. The annoying part of the quest here is just following people around and just listening to them pontificate forever. They just carry on and on and on. The exposition is ridiculous, and they really needed to pare that down. But we're not into the bad yet, so let's rein that in and move on. Differences in the characters. The fact that they play so differently was really, really cool. If you get tired of being sneaky and having to pay attention to things like you can't really fight a guy face to face, just grab the samurai and go to town. You can wander right into a castle and just start whacking people and take everything that you want from the place. Now, you won't have the advantage of being able to mark them or find them through the walls, but that won't matter when you just run through the walls, because he can bash through stuff without any problem. And if you keep up with his leveling, then he is pretty much an unstoppable force of terror and demise. Whereas if you're feeling like the more pure Assassin's Creed experience, you're going to get that with the ninja, who can do all the stuff you've come to expect from the other games. In fact, the samurai is so not an assassin that if you do fast travel to one of the sink points and jump off, he freaks out, screams, lands in the hay bale, destroys it, and then complains about how much it hurts. So he's definitely not an assassin, but you can still have the full experience. Unfortunately, you can't ignore one or the other. There are points in the game where you do have to play the other character in order to proceed with the quest. But for the most part, you can play them in any order you want. Now let's move on to some of the bad stuff. The technical stuff. I have had some crashes. After a period of time, I can't say exactly how long, it just crashes. It gives me a DirectX 12 error and boom, it's done. Didn't crash on the Xbox, and I did play it a little bit on there, but I don't know, it might have crashed on that too. I just never played it long enough. It usually was at least several hours though, so it's hard to really complain about this. Especially you'd have to binge the way I have been in order to experience these crashes. And of course, you never crash in a good place. You know, it's always in the middle of a fight, or it's always in something that you know that when you reload the game, you're going to be doing something over again, probably for maybe up to 10 minutes in some cases. And that's just kind of annoying and frustrating. But, you know, I mean, it was a brand new game. I don't even think it's been updated yet. So quite frankly, they're doing pretty well if that's all I've got for crashes, especially given Assassin's Creed's long-standing tradition of being buggy messes with tons of graphics problems and everything else that happens. I haven't really seen any major graphics issues. I've seen some stuff bouncing off in the distance that shouldn't be, and I've seen a couple of blank expressions, but as far as that goes, this game is pretty stable for Ubisoft. The buttons. Well, it's an Assassin's Creed game, so there's going to be challenges with the controls, and there are times that you want to climb and your character just chooses not to, or you're playing the samurai and you end up just bashing into stuff like you're the Kool-Aid man because you just lose control of your character, jumping off of stuff. Sometimes the roll just doesn't work. The roll that mitigates damage, it's just not there. It's pretty typical of these games, and the controls are generally the biggest challenge for you. And unfortunately, that becomes quite frustrating the longer you play, because of course you are going to experience it more and more. More on that in a few moments. Traveling. This is by far my biggest pet peeve. The game pads a lot of the time with just useless, totally senseless travel, just walking from point A to point B. And I kind of get it if there was more interesting sort of random events like Red Dead Redemption 2 out in the world, but frankly I didn't find any that really mattered. There was times where somebody would be like, oh my gosh, I'm poor and I'm having curses, and you stop to see what's going on and you can't interact with them, or you stop someone from being abused by a bad guy and they just stand there and look at you. Now on occasion you can talk to them and they'll be like, hey, do you want something in return? And you could turn them into a scout or whatever. But by and large, traveling in the open world just reveals that it's kind of empty. And while, yeah, you'll occasionally stumble on a thing to do, it's generally one of the things that kind of is boring by the time you've done it 40 times. So I think that they really did just stretch too much time with it. They should have found a way to make the travel a little bit less painful. Now, there's a Pathfinder system that can tell you how to get to waypoints, and it generally helps you to get around big mountains and stuff, but quite frankly, those mountains are the direct path and they can cut down a lot of time. Now, you will be plunging through plants and unable to see and often sliding around, but I've always been able to get over them, and it saved me a lot more time to just suffer through that frustration than to ride all the way around to get to wherever I was going. And to be fair, there are tons of fast travel options towards the end of the game, but it's, of course, getting to them because you got to get there first. And after a while, the world just feels way too big, and the characters keep sending you on these insane journeys, basically, for lack of a better term, where they're like, hey, I'm going to meet you so-and-so. And then you look and they're like way on the other side of the map, and you don't happen to have fast travel there. So now you're walking, and it's just like, come on, why couldn't they have just told me what they wanted right now? You know, because they need to write the 15 paragraphs that they're going to spill when I get there. It's just like, come on. And I found myself saying that a lot during travel. It's just like, oh, really? Again? My goodness. I'd say that of the 45-ish hours that I played, at least 5 of those hours, probably more, were just spent holding down the joystick, going in some direction, and in some cases, not even really watching what I was doing. I had a movie on half the time I had to do the travel, and I would just glance over to make sure I wasn't running into a stump. You know, it would have been nice maybe if they would have added a auto run so that you could just follow a path or something, but I don't know. That was just really, really frustrating, super annoying, and it got on my nerves big time. Too much content. So before I said that the content was both good and bad, there is a sweet spot for games where you feel like you're getting your money's worth and it's just enough to where you're like, yes, that was great. This game started to wear on me because there's just so much crap to do. Every time I thought, oh, I've got everything under control, I'm actually going to knock some things off the list, I would end up unlocking some new path of quests. Now, on one hand, yeah, that's cool, I guess, but you're kind of doing the same things over and over. Travel to a place, find a guy, kill him. I mean, granted, that's the game. It has repetition. There's a loop. The problem is that, well, yeah, they did add more than enough for you to do. I just think that they could have throttled back on it a little bit, and they could have focused more on the main story and made a little bit more diversity there rather than add all this extra stuff. And some of the content gets really stupid. Like, for example, if you go to a temple, you can find these lost pages. So you basically go there, you wander around, find some lost pages, you get a knowledge point. You go to a shrine, you got to pray at 3 shrines or however many, anywhere from 2 to 4 shrines, and you'll get a knowledge point. Well, if you only did that like a handful of times, I guess that'd be fine, but you're doing it a lot of times. You're just going to these places, doing those 2 events where you just run around the place, and it starts to feel like an MMO grind, which is ridiculous. There's no reason for that. They could have added more story to it. For example, maybe when you go to the shrines, you could get lore by doing the shrine worship in order and listening to someone say something. Or maybe with those lost pages, you could have started that quest and be building a book about all of them or something. I didn't really see any purpose in them other than to get the knowledge points. And those are just 2 things. There's also a meditation thing that your character does. Now, at the beginning, when the ninja's doing them, it unlocks more quest content to see more about her past, which is awesome. But then later on, it's just stuff to do that becomes increasingly more difficult so that you can get, you guessed it, knowledge points. There's katas for the samurai where you've got to hit buttons in a specific order, and they make it more difficult just by adding additional ones per level, and you got to get them all right. So it's like you mess one up and you could keep going. It's like just restart it right off the bat. Now, there is a button to restart it, just so you know. I didn't notice that for the first few I did. So if you're curious, if you're playing on an Xbox controller, you hold the Y key or the Y button and you're able to restart it if you mess up one of them. So maybe that'll help. But all of those little things to do the knowledge stuff, it's a necessary evil because you have to unlock the different levels of powers so that your character can become more powerful to take on greater challenges. And frankly, it's just frustrating because eventually you're like, I'm doing the busy work so that I can take care of the interesting stuff. Now, something else that gets pretty frustrating is the loads of cutscenes. When this game starts, you are watching a lot of cutscenes, and there are plenty smattered throughout. I thought that maybe it would only be a thing to top load to give you some exposition and really show you what's going on, but nope. You'll be seeing a lot of cutscenes, and some of them are freaking crazy long. 10, 20-minute cutscenes in some cases that are just chained together, and you're just watching a movie, basically. Now, quite frankly, I would watch this movie if they made the Assassin's Creed Shadows movie. And if they just wanted to make it a film, I would have been happy to watch it. Even an animated film would have been great. But I'm more here to play the game and do the stuff in it, not watch the characters just talk for endlessly, honestly. That also got very tiring, and it's part of the content. It's also just padding the hours. You know, they can say, hey, our game is X number of hours long. Well, yeah, because half the time I'm sitting here watching people just talk. And while I am invested in the characters and what they've got to say and stuff, I'm also struggling to deal with the fact that I just don't care about some of the random like asides they bring up. It feels tacked on. And something else that's interesting about too much content is you've got all of these people that you're hunting down for a good reason, not just revenge, but because they're pretty much ruining the land. So all this side stuff is kind of a distraction. You'd think that you would want to narrow the focus a little bit if you make something very dire. And in this case, it's obviously not dire enough because I have plenty of time to go and assassinate a bunch of pirates and assassinate a bunch of corrupt officials and go and hunt down a bunch of dudes that are just mysteriously attacking people at pawns. And then to do a bunch of side quests, like go and grab a whole bunch of random food for guys. Now, that does have a side benefit, but still, the side quests, the random stuff, it really does distract you from the whole purpose of the game, which is to hunt everybody down and take care of them. And so there it is. Anyway, that's the negative side of too much content. Let's move on. Some of the characters are just annoying. I'm not going to get too much into this because I don't want to add too many spoilers, but it becomes pretty obvious that the writers really wanted you to love some of these characters, and they're just goofy and in some cases just flat cringy. I don't want to say who specifically because I don't want to disparage someone who liked any of these guys, but there were quite a few that I'm like, oh my gosh, I need this guy to leave now. Leveling. Leveling is a horrible thing in this game. Primarily the problem is that you level to open the gates to get into higher level content. It doesn't make you feel more powerful because the world levels up with you. So your beginning zones that you were able to take on when you were going from levels 1 to say 15, they're now level 35 and level 38, just like you are. So even though you've got more powers, you're not necessarily doing more damage with your rank and file buttons because the characters are just the same level as you are. And so in a lot of ways, it feels like it's just a complete waste of time. They could have just as easily made the enemies skulls in the different places and not bothered with the leveling. And what's really frustrating about it is that not only do you have to level you up, but you've got to level your gear up, which means that you have to do more side stuff so that you can get the resources, so that you can buy the upgrades, or you can give them real world money so that you can get gold, which allows you to do an immediate upgrade. And it's not like you've only got one or two pieces of gear to upgrade. You've got plenty of stuff, and it's very expensive once you get up to the higher levels. So if you're not doing all the side stuff, then you're not keeping up with your gear. So again, they pad the time you're playing the game. Really, it's just arbitrary grinding, and I just didn't really feel it. Once I became aware of the fact that my character wasn't really doing any more damage and didn't feel that much better due to leveling, it became a chore. Now, buying up the new powers is pretty cool, unless they're passives, which I didn't really notice. But some of the cool stuff, like the ninja has a power where when she hits this guy, she then does 10 strikes right afterwards, and it looks amazing. And yeah, that's cool. When you buy those things, very neat. I think that we could have done away with leveling and just found another way to get these powers unlocked and then just reached certain checkpoints within the game to unlock the other content so that we didn't have to deal with the fact that, you just run into a 40th level guy who one-shots you for no reason. You just know he's a skull. You're in the wrong territory. Just don't go there. The fact that you can go there is kind of ridiculous, but whatever. So I don't think the leveling system is cool. I haven't enjoyed it since they introduced it. It's particularly annoying in this game. It just really stood out. Fast travel. So while fast travel is awesome because the world is huge and I would rather fast travel all over the place than just ride my horse endlessly for no reason, there are two types of fast travel. There are the sync points that we're all familiar with, and then there's little hideout places that you can get. Now, if you don't go to the hideouts, oftentimes those sync points are within some territory that is hostile. So you'll show up there, and just to leave, you've got to leave through some hostile territory where some guy's probably going to see you because, you've been fast traveling all over the place, or you're trying to do something else. So you don't feel like being stealthy just to leave the area, and you get attacked, you might get shot, whatever. And it's just crazy. And part of that is because you can't clear areas. You couldn't clear a temple and assume it's going to be empty because everybody respawns. Every time you come back, they're all back. And it's just like, come on, guys, what is going on with that? It became really annoying really fast. And I don't know what else to say about it. I just kind of wish that the sync points would have allowed you to be, I don't know, immune to being seen or something. And while I know that feels kind of video gamey, there's a lot of stuff about this one that is video gamey. For example, if you go in with the samurai and you just start tearing dudes up and you kill like 8 guys in a row and there was 10, the last 2 guys will literally throw their lives away to attack you. They never run away. That's very video gamey. There's no immersion there. Nobody is ever afraid of the fact that you just beheaded 3 guys in front of them and that you've turned toward them and you're not even hurt. So if they're willing to do that, and we already kind of feel like it's a game because we know we're in an animus and, you know, when you die, it's desynchronization, then just make it to where you can be immune for a minute. It's not that big of a deal, but I guess it's also not that big of a deal to run away and just ignore it. But eventually you're just like, oh, here it comes again. They're all screaming and I've got to run, whatever. The change of season animation. This is a total nitpicking thing, but after the first 8 times, I was kind of over the pretty transitions. And sometimes, for whatever reason, I just couldn't skip it. And so that was kind of a waste of time. Oddly enough, there's not really a modern day storyline to speak of in this game. And that seemed a little strange. I guess that they've been covering it in comics and novels or something, and they just kind of got rid of it in the video game. Which, you know, to be fair, I think a lot of people found it frustrating and annoying to have to leave the game that they were trying to achieve different stuff just so they can go wander around in a walking simulator for whatever amount of time. I know that I skipped a lot of it in the previous games, but I was kind of curious what was going to happen next. Maybe they'll cover it in another game. I have no idea. I have to say that it's a good thing it takes them a long time to make these and put them out now, because having pretty much finished this one, I can say that I have no desire to play another Assassin's Creed game for a while, which is good, I guess. You know, I feel mostly satisfied. As to whether or not I would recommend the game, that entirely depends on your tolerance for lists, number one, because pretty much everything in the game is a list of stuff to do. How much you can handle of cutscenes and just long-winded diatribes from NPCs, and whether or not you can stomach the grind that you have to go through to get it. A great example of the quote-unquote grind is that there is a really badass outfit that you can get when you pretty much finish the game. And it's like, what's the point? I mean, I guess that you might still have a bunch of side stuff to do that you can use it with, but I always find it frustrating when a game allows you to get something at the very end that you would have just loved to have earlier. And it would have been super beneficial and a lot of fun. But now you've basically got it to wrap up any loose ends that you either forgot about or just didn't care about. A great example of something that I didn't really find all that interesting was the hideout. You can build all kinds of stuff there. You got different rooms and breezeways, and you can upgrade them. You can put animals in there. You can decorate it. And I just didn't care. I mean, the one time I did it was in Fallout, when you could build your bases in that. And then after I had basically turned the Red Rocket into a Iron Man pad, I just felt like I had built a base in a game, and I just didn't really feel the urge to do it in a single player game. Now, I do have a strange thought about that, which I should talk about in another video, but I'll just plant the seed here, is that for some reason, single player games have a different connotation for doing specific events than MMOs and online games do. For example, building a base in an MMO feels like it has more value than building it in a single player game. And I'll explore that at another date. It doesn't have much bearing on reality the more I thought about it. But anyway, for me, Assassin's Creed Shadows was a lot of fun. I was capable of beating it. I thought that I got my money's worth, especially since I just paid the Ubisoft Plus subscription for it. I'm not sure that I should have played it as fast as I did. I probably needed to give it more time, but I'm afraid that something else would have come out, would have distracted me, or I would have found something else that pulled my attention away, and then would have come back, lost all my skills again, and these games, you really got to keep up with them. Otherwise, you end up getting kind of torn up when you get into fights. So I don't know. I guess I was in a catch-22. Either play it fast and beat it, or play it longer and risk never finishing it, kind of like I did with Ghost of Tsushima. But all around, I liked it. I know that I had more bad than good when I was talking about it, and my bad stuff sounded like I was particularly angry. And quite frankly, the longer a game goes, the more you're going to experience the pet peeves. So it makes sense that you'd become more frustrated with it all around, especially when you cram. But anyway, have you played Assassin's Creed Shadows? What is your favorite Assassin's Creed game? Let me know in the comments. Let's have a talk. But this is Robert with Society Case Files, signing off.